I plan to do a podcast on the contrast and similarities between Scott Peterson and Chris Watts, because if anyone knows, Scott Peterson was charged and convicted of murdering his wife Lacey Peterson, and his family have been trying to get him out of prison, and with appeal after appeal after appeal after appeal, and he's scheduled to be resentenced in December. And leading up to that day, I would like to do a podcast about him, and particularly the similarities between him and Chris Watts, and also the differences. But today I want to focus on Brian Laundrie. I did say about a month ago that I think that it's very probable that this is a murder-suicide. And it turns out that I was right, that Brian Laundrie killed Gabby. I am absolutely certain. And then he either took his own life, I mean, physically took his own life himself, or he put himself in a situation that was dangerous where he knew that he would be in harm's way. Either way, he deliberately put himself in harm's way, committed suicide, put himself in harm's way because he didn't want to have to deal with the consequences of what he did. He's a coward and he's a sociopath and he's a narcissist. And some people might say, well, you never knew him and you don't know much about him. How can you make that assessment? Well, I can make that assessment based upon all the facts. Because if he was not getting along with Gabby, a normal person who is not a narcissist, who's not a sociopath, would simply say, maybe we should end this trip. It's over between us, and go their separate ways. A normal person would have done that. I know people who have ended their relationships after going on a trip together and finding that they just don't belong together. And that's what a normal person does. Instead, he decided to take her life. Then he decided to flee and take his own life, so no one would stop him. And he probably realized after some time that if they found him, he was gonna have to pay the consequences, and he was gonna have to answer. And he didn't want that. I think the police are responsible for the fact that there's going to be no justice in this case whatsoever. And I'm very angry with the police, but that is a separate issue. I'm not going to go on and on about, all the wrong things that they did. I mean, they didn't keep tabs on him. They didn't question him. He was the prime suspect from day one. And the person of interest BS just doesn't wash with me. I remember seeing Jonathan Walsh. I think that's his name, John Walsh. I mean, I've been watching John Walsh for years. Sometimes I do forget things when I've got so many names to. I think John Walsh was saying there's no way that Brian is dead and that he's hiding, and that he doesn't have the guts to kill himself. I think I heard him say that, but I never actually believed that I never actually believed that Brian wouldn't kill himself. I could sense from very early on that this was probably a murder-suicide. I said that in an earlier podcast. I wrote that in the title, murder-suicide accident. I knew that this was a very, very likely and probable scenario. And, this is just a case of a relationship gone horribly wrong. A young girl, a young innocent girl who got involved with a sociopath, probably a psychopath, maybe more a psychopath than a sociopath, in fact, or maybe a bit of both, and didn't know. This is solved as far as I'm concerned. This case, the Brian Laundrie, Gabby Petito case, is solved. He murdered her. He got back to Florida and then decided that he couldn't deal with the consequences of what he did and decided to take his own life. That's what happened. He killed her and then killed himself. It's a classic murder-suicide. It's a young couple. It's a young man who didn't know how to deal with his own emotions, very emotionally immature, low impulse control, who killed himself after killing and murdering his girlfriend. This didn't need to happen, but this is what psychopaths do. This is the behavior of a psychopath. So this is a solved case now. This is no longer a mystery. Um, and unfortunately, unlike in the Chris Watts case and the Scott Peterson case, we're not even going to get a sentencing hearing. We're not going to see Brian in handcuffs. We're not going to see Brian in court. There's going to be nothing. It's going to be an unfinished case. There's not going to be a trial. There's not going to be a sentence hearing. We're not going to get a lot of answers that we're looking for. We might know, or I might say, this is what happened, but the exact reasons as to why he decided or when he decided to do what he did, we're never going to know. And that's the case. But this crime has now been solved. Unfortunately, we're not going to get to see Brian in handcuffs. We're not going to get a lie detector test. We're not going to get audio of an interrogation. We're not going to see him walking into court. And that's very, very, very unfortunate, because we have all that with Chris Watts. We have all that with Scott Peterson. And we will possibly have that with the Chad Daybell case. But we're not going to get that here. And that's a very, very sad thing. This is not how I wanted things to end. Even though my prediction was pretty much correct, I didn't want to be right. This is not what I wanted. I wanted justice for Gabby and Gabby's family. There's no closure. Yes, it's solved, in my opinion, but there's still that, there's still loose ends. And we're never going to get a confession out of Brian because he's now deceased. And this is a complete and utter tragedy of a romance gone horribly, horribly wrong.